On Tuesday night at Minges Coliseum, East Carolina will be hosting the Mercer Bears as the Mike Schwartz Era begins. And right now to talk about that and a little quick preview of the Mercer Bears, very excited to welcome me in the second-year color analyst on the Pirate Radio Network alongside Jeff Charles, former East Carolina assistant Michael Perry. Coach, we appreciate your time this morning.
No problem at all. Enjoy talking about the Pirates.
No doubt, a lot of excitement as the new era of East Carolina basketball begins with Coach Schwartz. And, before we dive into some of the specifics about this team and who the Pirates are playing on Tuesday night in the Mercer Bears, I know Coach Schwartz, as we were talking off air, is someone you've known for some time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go back to Mike when he was an assistant coach, really kind of getting started. As I think he might have been an operations guy at the time at University of Miami with Frank Haith.
No doubt. And that's one of the things, his background, not only with Frank Haith, obviously strong ties to Rick Barnes, and he's coached all around the country, some very solid conferences. He's had success wherever he's been, and that's one of the things that I really liked about the hire.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got a really good background. As you see with a lot of coaches, sometimes some coaches come out of families of coaches or from a coaching tree. You can track their origins or their coaching style a lot of times to the coaching tree or family that they come out of. And he certainly comes from a really great pedigree. And Rick Barnes, who's not only outstanding coach, one of the best coaches of our era, but he's also produced some really outstanding assistant coaches that have gone on to be outstanding head coaches. And we saw up close in person with Frank Haith over the past few years at Tulsa over the past few years. And Mike's, cut from that same fabric of a lot of really good coaches that are on that tree from Rick Barnes.
In addition to Coach Schwartz, he's assembled a very impressive staff. So talk about some of those guys. Have you had the opportunity to, obviously, I'm sure, since they've been in Greenville, you've gotten to know them a little bit, but did you know them prior to them becoming Pirates?
Yeah, not a lot. I knew Jake Morton. I've known Jake for years, and certainly, we've hung out on the road and things like that, and known each other for a long time. So I've known Jake. The other guys I've not known, and again, we're all just kind of getting to know each other. But it's an outstanding staff, and guys have great backgrounds, and I like their energy in practice. You can look at the players and tell that they're listening to everything, and they make great eye contact with the assistant coaches as well as the head coach. There seems to be a great connection with the players and the coaches that, obviously those are the type of things that I look at and pick up on, but that's very obvious and very striking from our very first practices.
Taking a look at this roster, major roster overhaul, a lot of young men transferring out of the program as well as transferring in. And even though there are a couple of transfers, this is a roster that's extremely young, very unproven, but I think there's a considerable amount of talent there and on paper, some quality pieces that Coach Schwartz and staff brought in.
Outstanding pieces, but just to underscore the point that you just made about a lot of new faces, that's typically what you're going to see every year. That's just the nature of college basketball today. It's very hard to look at a team from year in and year out and think you're going to get very similar look from the year before. There's a lot of transition, kids coming in and kids moving on. So every year it appears that a lot of teams are taking on a new look and a new identity in terms of the personnel. The coaches remain intact in what they're trying to do. Their philosophies will come through. But sometimes it's going to take a little longer than others because there's a meshing of a lot of different personalities and playing styles.
Yeah, with your interaction with Coach Schwartz and the point that you were just making as far as the roster turnover from one season to the next, that's one of the things that made this so interesting, that Coach Schwartz, in an era where so many people were attempting to have success via the transfer portal, yes, he brought in a guy like a Quentin DeBouge, and then also Jaden Walker from Iowa State. But by and large, he's attempting to build this program from high school talent. So what has Coach Schwartz had to say in your interactions with him about that?
Well, I think he was supposed to get the guys that work well for him. And I think Mike is the kind of guy, at least from what I've been able to pick up on, and just in my conversation with him, he wants to do it the right way. And character that's the most important factor in putting together the roster. He wants guys of high character. Obviously, he wants guys that can play. Let's not forget that. He wants guys that can play, guys that are tough mentally, and guys of high character. So that's where it starts for him. So whether it was a transfer, whether it's a high school kid, whether it's a junior college, he's going to put the priority in character. And I think he got a mixture of all of that. He got a couple of transfer kids, Division I transfers, because that is in fashion today. I mean, you need to get on board, or you're not going to be very competitive if you don't enter into that market. And he did so. He got a junior college kid, and he's got a few high school kids. So it's going to be a meshing of different types of kids for him. But I think the one thing you're going to see that's consistent is kids of high character and mentally tough.
Now, 85 to 90% of this Pirates scoring from a season ago is gone. Guys, proven commodities like Tristan Newton, who moved on to UConn, Vance Jackson, Brandon Suggs, who's now at UCF, Alonzo Frink. So what you've had the opportunity to see this team in practice, what are some of the pieces that you really like and that you're hearing from the coaching staff are going to be taking on the scoring load and you're pulling down rebounds and so on?
It's still early, obviously, with scrimmages and fragmented scrimmages, that you have on a daily basis, and your team, it's still early. It's going to be really difficult to kind of pinpoint like who are going to be your scorers now. And I think that's true for a lot of teams, particularly with inexperienced guys, unproven guys. Guys are still trying to find their way. So it's going to probably be scoring by committee initially. And then as the season evolves, then you're going to see guys emerge as maybe the more consistent scorers. But I think right now, with this program, I think it starts with defense. And that's, for me, that's one of the things that's really striking. And I was around, obviously, with Jeff Lebo, and then I was watch closely Joe Dooley's teams, and really offensive-minded teams. That's kind of where they built from. That was kind of their background. Whereas Mike's program, at least right now, initially, to me, they're going to hang their hat on their defense initially. And we're going to see a different look team than what you're accustomed to seeing. And it's going to be really refreshing to see too, because as I said, they're going to hang their hat on their defense, and defense is where you really want to start. You want to build a foundation with defense, and defense creates offense sometimes as well, and it creates an identity, a toughness about them. And it's still early. We're going to see how that all unfolds, but just the striking difference to me initially is a program that's built on defense, and they hang their hat on their defense.
Along those lines, you do have a guy like a Luigi DeBow on the interior, but many of these pieces, they're not extremely large. The Pirates are missing some size, but as you know, in college basketball and the way things have been trending in recent years, that's not all that uncommon. So talk about some of those guys. I mentioned Jaden Walker coming in from Iowa State, who is not only a very solid defender, but also a tremendous rebounder. What have you seen from some of those guys who can play a variety of positions?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned him because he's an outstanding athlete. He's one of those guys that when you look at him, you know he's an athlete, and it's pretty impressive. And again, he can guard multiple positions. He can do a lot of things on the floor. Pretty special player, and yeah. But they've got big wings. I mean, he's a big wing. They've added a couple of other big wings, and guys that can play multiple positions. They can small ball, power forward. They can actually play the two-guard, point guard position. But they've got big wings. They've added some post players, young kids, but they've got really good size that they've added. The kid Ezra and Elijah, a 6'8", 6'9" freshman who can really help out in the interior. They got size, they've got athleticism. So they've added some, and particularly guys that can move. The foreign kid is a really good player, Valentino. Heady, knows how to play. He's about 6'8". So they've added some other pieces to go along with Luigi and also BJ, Brandon Johnson.
And you mentioned the point guard position. Javon Small returned from the season ago, didn't log a ton of minutes, but he did play more as the season went on. And then in addition to Javon, you also have a guy like Caleb LeCount, who, yes, he is, only, I think he's listed at 5'7" or 5'8", but who knows if he's even that tall. But I love what I've seen of him, and I think, sure, he's going to perhaps have those mismatches at times, but he seems to really get after it defensively and also can really score. And what he led the state of California with over 30 points per game last year in high school.
Yeah, between him and Javon, you're going to have pretty solid point guard play. You may have some of the other guys that can fill in there from time to time as well. Javon is probably the team's best perimeter shooter, and really shoots the ball well. And I think he gained a lot of experience last year playing behind the two guards that they had last year. And those guys were really outstanding guards and two-way guys that played both ends, both offensively and defensively. They could really score the ball. I think he got a lot of experience playing with those guys. And he's shooting the ball well, and that's one of his strengths right now. He's a guard with size. And the kid Caleb, you can't be a 5'8" guard who plays on Division I level who it doesn't have a lot of talent and a lot of confidence and a lot of toughness. And he possesses all three of those. He's talented, he's got a lot of confidence, and he also has some toughness about him. And at 5'8", he's not afraid of anything. But really been impressed with him and both of those young guys in terms of their leadership. And again, it's all unproven, so it's going to be a work in progress because all these guys are entering to, uncharted waters because they haven't been there before. So they're going to be making a name for themselves and also learning a lot about themselves as they go along.
Coach, a name that I know you can certainly relate to, who was a tremendous player back in the 80s and throughout the 90s for the Charlotte Hornets, played at Wake Forest, and not necessarily the same type of player. I'm not making that comparison, but just from a size standpoint, a guy like Muggsy Bogues, he's someone, hey, a lot of people, I'm sure, overlooked him because of him being 5'3". Maybe that will be the case with Caleb LeCount, and I think that he has a very bright future with the Pirates.
Yeah, I think he does. I'm always a little hesitant when people make comparisons to NBA guys, and Muggsy Bogues. A lot of people know it, but he was actually the MVP of the McDonald's All-American game in D.C. So he was a pretty special talent now. But yeah,
right. Simply from a size standpoint.
Yeah, and again, small guards are always impressive to me, particularly ones that play on the Division I level, because they're all very similar in that there's a lot of confidence. As a young guy said, there's a lot of swagger and confidence just in terms of how they walk on the floor and just the way they handle themselves, and a lot of moxie out there. And he can score at different levels, and he's got a lot of confidence, and that's really important, particularly as a freshman. And they're being thrown into the fire. This is a tough league they play in, one of the top leagues in the country, and they got a really challenging out of conference schedule. So you got to have that type of confidence and toughness, and he has it. And I think you're going to see that with guys that Mike recruits. They're going to always have a high level of character, but also that mental aspect to them. They're going to be tough guys mentally.
Shifting to take a look at the Pirates' opening night opponent, that is the Mercer Bears out of the SoCon. They're projected to finish 7th by both the media and the coaches in the Southern Conference. They have a fourth-year head coach in Greg Gary, and he, over the last 3 seasons, he's averaged 17 wins per year. So they've certainly had some success. And tell us what you know about Mercer.
Yeah, but Gary is a coach, another guy who comes from really good pedigree. Matt Painter from Purdue, that's who he was a longtime assistant with him, and he got the job here. It wasn't his first rodeo. He had actually been a head coach at Centenary a few years back, and the program actually, after a couple of years there, decided they were going to drop and go to Division III. And that's when he left and he went back into the assistant coaching ranks. He's been at Purdue for a long haul there. And that's another program that hangs their head on their defense as well. And he's part of that pedigree and that long line of coaches, assistant coaches that went on to become head coaches there. Yeah, he's won 18, 17, and 16 games the past 3 years. He's got a couple of about 3 starters returning. But again, just like East Carolina, just like most teams in the country, they've had an influx of turnover in terms of guys. They had some guys leave, and they had some guys come in. A few Division I transfers, one from our league. It's going to be interesting. A kid out of South Florida who actually started his career at South Carolina, McCray, who's like one of the leading scorers and leading rebounder, or second leading rebounder in the only exhibition game that they had that was made to the public. There were a couple of kids that were picked preseason all conference, a guard who can really score at a couple of different levels, Robinson, and another kid, Gillison, who didn't play in the preseason game. So I'm a little curious what's happening with him. They got a 7'2" freshman center out of South Africa, and I haven't seen a lot of players come out of South Africa, but that's going to be interesting to see. He had 12 rebounds in the exhibition game. So they've got some kids, some Division I transfers, another kid that's in the rotation who's from Nebraska, but the very best transfer that they had is a kid out of the Atlantic 10 from Fordham who scored the ball in the Atlantic 10 with some consistency, probably on paper was going to be their better offensive player. Now, he didn't play in this last exhibition, but it'll be interesting to see if he's available to go. And then there's a local flavor to that team, a kid named Sean Walker, who I know Sean. He used to come to the East Carolina basketball camps years ago. His dad was the head coach at Elizabeth City. He's from Elizabeth City. He started his career off at George Washington, went to Tallahassee Community College, and then he's transferred to Mercer. He was there last year, finished the season as a starter, averaged about 6 points a game, and a really good shooter, about 6'6". He's grown from when I remember him being about 6'2", 6'3", but can really shoot the basketball, skill, and he's a local kid, so you have some people here in the stands yelling for him.
You mentioned David Craig, the 7'2" big, the freshman out of South Africa. He had 11 points and 12 rebounds in that exhibition game against Division III LaGrange College, and a game in which Mercer won handily, as you would expect, 107-56. And then you also referenced the South Florida and South Carolina transfer, and that is Jalen McCurry, 15 points and 6 rebounds. And in his action at South Florida and South Carolina, he was a 12 to 15 minute per game guy, averaging about 5 points and 3 rebounds per contest. And he is 6'8", and a guy that I think you may have made mention of, but we did not mention specifically, is Mike Zanoni. He is from Greensboro Day School, and he had 17 points in that game against LaGrange, and it stood out that he knocked down 3 out of 4 3-pointers, and some of the research I did on him, he was known as one of the top, if maybe the top 3-point shooter in the class coming out of the state of North Carolina. So he's someone to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. He can shoot the basketball. I will caution anyone that looks at that score and just remember LaGrange, and I know LaGrange well. I used to be the head coach at Georgia State and was assistant there for a while. We had LaGrange a few times on the schedule. It's a feel-good game a lot of nights. So a lot of guys get out there and get a chance to play and put up some numbers. So not a real good indicator, but maybe a glimpse of some things that come. I think things like rebounds, I think that's something that you can really look at and it travels well, whether it's a Division III opponent or a Division I opponent. If you rebound the basketball, typically you rebound the basketball every night against any opponent. So I was a little interested. I found it interesting that some of the guys that rebounded the ball, particularly like the 7'2" kid that had 12 rebounds, that was pretty interesting to me. Even though it was an opponent that they should beat, and I think close to 50 points they beat them by, but still 12 rebounds on any night and in limited action too is pretty impressive.
No doubt, especially for a freshman, like you say, and going against a team that probably doesn't have nearly as much size. So that's when you consider he's probably battling much smaller players for those 12 boards. That's impressive also. But and their 3-point shooting, regardless of the opponents, as we know and we've seen through the years, just because you're playing what should be an inferior opponent doesn't necessarily mean you're knocking down shots, whether they're wide open or not. But so they knocked down 7 out of 8 threes in the second half, so that's something to keep an eye on. And obviously the Pirates are really priding themselves on defense, so that's something to watch. But Coach, really appreciate your time, and we look forward to having you back on throughout the season to talk Pirate basketball.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it.